It really changes you. I don't relate much to the JM of 3 years ago, describes Formula 2 racing driver Juan Manuel Correa. In 2019, Juan Manuel, also known as JM, was involved in a serious crash at the Spa track with Anthoine Hubert. JM had serious injuries to both his legs, back and spine, and unfortunately, Hubert lost his life. Back in the car within months and having returned to F2 in 2023, JM realised this wasn't just a physical recovery, but emotional and mental too. Rock bottom is liberating, but after the accident, JM understood that even at your lowest, there is always something to live for. His approach to life and perspectives changed, and what truly makes him happy. So how do we move forward after what we've been through?
So today we're with Juan Manuel. How are you?
I'm good. I've had a busy day, but here to make things more interesting for me.
Thank you. Breaking up the day, aren't I? Right in the middle.
You're giving me a bit of a break from the normal media stuff, so this is fun.
Good. Yeah, this is our setup's been fun as well.
So it's been a bit of a we got it going.
We got it going.
Yeah.
So obviously today we're here to talk all about your story, everything that's happened, and where you are now. So the ball is over to you, and you can start wherever you want.
Well, I mean, I can start really from the beginning. So I was born in Ecuador, Quito, Ecuador, the capital. And I was always in a family that was involved in motorsports. So both parents, big motorsports fans on both sides of the family, grandparents and uncles as well, but never any professional drivers. But I kind of grew up in that environment, and I actually started racing motocross when I was 4 years old. So my dad was very much into motorcycles. And then at 7 years old, I tried a go-kart. And my mom was never a big fan of me riding motorcycles because they're quite dangerous. And I jumped in a go-kart, and from that day on, I guess I found my calling, as you would say, and I never wanted to go back into a motorcycle. I started practicing, racing, and just like most other drivers, it all started to scale up from there. It starts like as a hobby, something to do on the weekends with your parents, with your friends, and before you know it, you're racing the national championships, going overseas. And when I was 11, my family and I moved to Miami for my dad's work, so it was not related to my racing. But that was very good for my career because I started racing in the USA. My dad is American, by the way, so I have double nationality. And it was kind of like the same progression from local small karting races to national championships. And eventually in 2013, I won the world championship, which was like a big upset because I was still racing just nationally in the USA at that point. And that's when my career, I would say, kind of like exploded. I had my first professional contract in Italy. I had to pack my bags at 14, move over there, and I started working my way up the ladder in Europe, racing karting, then Formula 4, then GP3, then Formula 2. And this is very condensed, obviously. This was over a lot of years and a lot of work, but eventually I made it to Formula 2. I was 19, that's when I signed, and that's when the accident happened in that year. So actually the first part of the year went really well. I was one of the best rookies so far. I had 2 podiums, and then after the summer break we had the race in Belgium, and that's where the accident happened. So I don't know if you just want to get into it or.
Wherever you want to go with the accident, absolutely.
So, well, I'll tell you what happened. It was Saturday, which for F2 is the feature race day, the long one. I had a very bad qualifying the day before. I made a mistake, and I was starting like 16th, so I had to make up some positions. Started the race. I had a really good start, and then as we were beginning the second lap, everything seemed normal. Kind of like everyone was settling in, so most of the time the accidents are over by then. And then going up Eau Rouge Radillon, which is this very high speed uphill corner, that it becomes blind, so you cannot see what's right after. I was going through it flat out, and as soon as I reached the top, I just saw a piece of carbon from another car, like kind of like sliding across the track, and it went under my car, so it hit my front wing. My wing went under the car, and these cars are so low that when something gets stuck under, your front tires are up in the air, so you cannot turn the steering wheel. So I was like, oh shoot, I'm going into the wall. So I kind of like braced for impact, and at this point I was doing maybe 160 miles an hour. And then last minute I looked up, and I just saw another car standing still in front of me, and that's what I hit. But it all happened like maybe like a second or half a second, everything that I'm telling you. So it was super, super sudden. And then the main thing that I remember at that moment was the pain was super intense, which was scary because usually with the amount of adrenaline we have, we cannot feel pain, right? Like I've had other big crashes, nothing even close to this, where I'm fine, and then 5 hours later I cannot get up from bed because I'm so sore. But I knew in this case that something was seriously wrong, especially with the legs. And the car ended up on its head. I kind of went into survival mode. I unstrapped myself and started trying to crawl out of the car, but I was screaming from the pain. It was really, really horrible. And for some reason, I thought I had lost my legs. I felt like they had been just amputated because it almost felt like they were just connected by the racing suit. Like they were like a puppet,
Yeah.
And it was pretty nasty. And as I was getting out, I don't want, maybe some people are gonna be like, this is too much. Oh, so anyway, I was scooting out, and then the medics arrived. They sedated me. When I saw the medics' faces, is when I really got freaking scared, because they were like, they didn't know what to do, like, and I was like, oh my god, it's bad. And yeah, I was in a lot of pain. They sedated me, and I woke up the next day in a Belgian hospital after the first set of surgeries. So basically what happened is I completely destroyed both of my legs, especially the right lower tibia. So it was pretty much disintegrated. The left one had a clean break in 2 parts, and they were able to put a intramedullary titanium nail through it and stabilize it. But the right one, the next morning when I woke up, they said, like, we cannot save that leg here. Like, we either amputate it or you go somewhere else to try to get it saved. So at that point, I was still not that worried. I don't want to say not that worried, but it was like, okay, the worst has passed, right?
Yeah.
We'll try to fix the leg, whatever. I'm alive. I broke my back as well, but it was a stable fracture. So, a lot of things could have been much worse. I still didn't know about Anthoine passing away. So then, over the course of that day, I started complaining a little bit about my breathing. Like, I couldn't breathe well. My lungs felt funny. And nobody really knew what was going on. And then over the next few days, it just got worse and worse and worse. And I started literally like drowning in my own lungs. Until a friend of ours, a doctor, he recommended that we come to London, actually. Because he said, look, these doctors here in Belgium, they don't really know what's going on. He suspected that I was going to have a lung failure, and the machine that I needed to survive a lung failure was not available in Belgium. So we took a medical plane, arrived to London, still with an open fracture in the right, so we hadn't been able to do anything about that yet. So it kind of like switched from that being our priority to the lungs, because it was going downhill quite fast. And I think 20 hours after I landed in London, my lungs collapsed completely. And they put me into an induced coma with this machine called the ECMO, which is it's basically a machine that takes out all your blood, oxygenates it, and puts it back in to the other side. It's crazy. Yeah, but you have to be in an induced coma for that. Obviously, you cannot be awake. So yeah, that was like 2 weeks of me being out. Woke up from that, and immediately the attention shifted back to the leg, because it still had an open fracture. By that stage, they had removed so much of the dead tissue, because it just kept, they had to keep opening the wound. that I had a hole that was about the size of a big potato. Like you could see. I'll show you a picture after.
No, do.
I'll show you now. Actually, you can.
Are we gonna see it now?
If you want
to
to.
see my live reaction.
Yeah, that could be interesting.
I don't find things like this squeamish. I say right now.
So that was the original X-ray.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So the right one pretty straight. The left one not that bad.
Yeah.
And I broke all of the bones in the feet as well, as you can see. Like I had mini fractures everywhere.
I mean, it's just like it looks like a piece of chalk.
Yeah, it's like it got run over by a bus. Yeah. That's how big it was by the end of it. So that's this part.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's a proper hole.
Yeah, so it started like this, just a little bit of the bone sticking out, and little by little, this one's nasty.
No, I mean, it doesn't look real. I
No,
mean,
it looks
that
like
doesn't look real.
a CSI episode.
Yeah, no, that looks like something you see on the television.
And then, so when they did the surgery to save the leg, which we'll get to that, this is how they did it, and they removed all those bones.
I mean, that looks like a crime scene.
Yeah, it's nasty. But we'll get to that. So then my lungs survived the coma. I came out, and initially the recommendation was to amputate the leg, the right one, because at that point, it was in a really bad state. And they were very worried that the surgery needed to try to save it was going to be too long, and my lungs would not stand it, and I was going to die in the surgery. So it was a tough decision for me, because I really wanted to try to save the leg, because I wanted to race again, and I needed the feeling. I didn't want to race with a prosthetic, or in that case I would have had to use a hand control in the steering wheel. But that really closes a lot of the doors for you as a driver, right? When the team has to make those type of adaptations, it's not easy to find a seat. So I opted to have the surgery and kind of risk it. And we had like a menu of the options, like from A to Z, like bad, good to bad to worse. And a lot of those were like, the worst was I died in the surgery. The best was that they would find all the pieces of bone still had enough blood supply that they were still alive, and they wouldn't have to remove any bone, and they would just kind of like stick it together. And for sure I would have had a lot of damage in the cartilage, whatever, but the whole bone would be able to be fixed. And really it ended up coming somewhere in the middle, so they had to remove a lot of the bone. I didn't die, which was good, but the recovery was going to be very, very long, because they removed 10 centimeters of the tibia, like just out. So I had no bone, like, and they put that exoskeleton. So in the beginning it was messed up, like you could go in the front of my tibia and just squish through, and there was no bone, so you could almost reach the other side. And then up here there was bone.
I can see on your face as well, you're still in shock about it.
I mean, it was weird. I was playing with it all the time. I was like, oh my god, this is crazy. So yeah, it was, So they put the external fixator, and then they started regrowing my bone. I didn't know you could regrow bone, but what they do is they cut it on the top where it's healthy, and they start transporting it down 1 millimeter per day. That's a rate where the bone doesn't fully separate, so it's still kind of the inside of the bone stretches, and then bone gets formed around the inside. So I did that for 100 days. So I literally had my wrench every day. I'm not joking. Every day, 1 millimeter, and stretching it out like that for 100 days. So, yeah, that's pretty rough.
Our bodies are wild, though. Our bodies, how our bodies can do things like that.
No, it's like the things I saw. Honestly, now I'm almost like a pre-certified doctor. Like I spent 2 months in the hospital. It got to a point where I was telling the nurses what to do. No, like seriously, like even things like IVs and stuff. Like I can take my own blood out now. Like before the accident, I would pass out if I had blood drawn. I would pass out. Now, I give myself like shots in the pass, whatever,
Yeah.
which before, like, I couldn't see a needle, I would be like all shaky. So it really changes you. And then the recovery after that was arguably the worst part, to be honest. Oof. And that's, in the beginning when the doctor said you should amputate it, I was like, why? And they're like, because the process to recover will be so long and painful that you will end up wanting to amputate,
Yeah.
And I couldn't fathom, like, how could somebody prefer that until I went through it. Yeah. And I'll tell you, like, if I had to do it again, I don't know if I would go through, like, yeah, honestly. Maybe I would still, because I have a career and I need my leg, but if you would tell me, like, you cannot drive anyways after, I would probably just amputate it and have a prosthetic. Yeah. It was horrible, and also I still live with pain every day. Like, my right ankle is completely messed up. Like, that's all the movement I have. And I have pretty severe arthritis, which I will have to deal with for the rest of my life. So it's the best we could do, but it's better than what we expected.
Yeah, no, of course.
So that was it, and then I always knew I wanted to get back into a car. So early on in the hospital, I told myself, like, and I realized that I was gonna need a goal to work towards. Otherwise, I was just gonna get depressed, and so I put that as a goal, and it was kind of sad because people were like, yeah, sure, like, they felt pity, and there's nothing worse than people feeling pity for you. At least for me, I hate it. But I just, day by day, started getting a little bit closer, but it seemed impossible up until the moment it wasn't. Like, I remember when I signed my contract, I was still in a wheelchair, and I had managed to convince the boss of this team that I was gonna be ready, and that I had doctor certifications that I was gonna be ready. It was all fake. Not really. I falsified it. So then he gave me the chance. Seb Philippe, French guy. And I owe him for that. But I went back to Miami. I had to sit down with my doctor. I said, I have to be driving in 4 months. And he started laughing, right? And I said, no, it's not a joke. Like, I have a contract. And he was like, no, like, impossible. Like, I'm not going to do that. Until I kind of, like, told him, I'll do it with you or with somebody else. So, it's your choice. And then we started looking at kind of like experimental treatments to speed the whole process up. So we ended up taking out the external fixator, which I was supposed to have for another 6 months. And we put an internal titanium rod also in this one. So then I had one on each leg. But that had a big risk of infection. So we had to do the whole treatment for that before. So it was hard. And then once I was metal free externally, it was now a matter of focusing a lot on the rehab and learning to walk. At that stage, I was still wheelchair and crutches, like, I couldn't walk. And I was supposed to be in a car like in 2 months. So actually, for my first test day in a race car, I was walking around with crutches and then driving. So that was like kind of like my first year racing. Was I used to say I'm half patient, half driver, because I'm still like doing 5 hours of rehab every day. And slowly, I've gotten to this stage, which, when I talk about the whole story again and look at it on the big picture, it's quite surreal that I'm in this position.
It is. It's amazing. It's amazing to be in this position. I mean, obviously that you made it out, but then obviously to be in this position where you're also back in the car and you're walking. Do you sometimes pinch yourself and think you can't be where you are?
Yeah, especially like I said, when I look back at it, it's quite strange. It almost feels like that happened in a different life. You know what I mean? It's like I can't relate that much to the JM of 3 years ago, lying in a hospital bed, like, thinking his life was over, right? Because it isn't, and I'm back. There's still a lot of things I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, but that has become kind of like my new normal, and I just adapt to it. But I'm not constantly thinking all day about it, right? Like
Mhm.
it just kind of,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's happened to you. You learn to live with certain types of pain, and you adapt.
Yeah.
It's incredible how the mind and the body adapt to
Mm.
whatever it gets. It's really cool.
No, I agree. It's incredible what the mind can do.
Yep.
Do you think you've changed a lot as a person from the accident? You said you don't recognize who you were 3 years ago. So do you think everything that happened with the accident has completely changed you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, for sure.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot of it has to do with just growing up. I think from 19 to 23, it's also an important stage in every man's life, right? But no, I have changed a lot. Like there's before and after the accident of how I am, and even my identity as a whole. I think my approach to life changed quite a lot. It's kind of sad that sometimes it takes something so horrific to put certain things into perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this made me realize. Like we get so caught up in our day-to-day lives, in a bit the culture that we live in, like where there's really trivial things that actually don't matter, and we make them a big deal, and we let that dictate our emotions. And I realized with this, thank God I realized it early. I feel like that's a privilege, to be honest, that most of the things people worry about are BS. Like it's just like that's not a real problem, like so it makes you approach life with I would say a cleaner view, and just more thankful, more chilled out. I'll tell you one thing, like an example. Obviously I've been racing my whole life, sacrificed a lot for it. So when I remember 2019, before the accident, for me getting to F1 was like, it was everything, right? Like I was actually like convinced in my head that if I wouldn't make it to F1, I wouldn't be able to be happy the rest of my life. No joke.
Yeah, that's interesting.
After the accident, I was like, like that's like maybe this big in the grand scheme of your life and what makes you happy, right? I was convinced before that if I didn't drive and if I wasn't a racer, I would be miserable. Mm-hmm. After the accident, I was like, that's simply not true. I found other things that give me pleasure, that fill me, and that I could do. I just chose to get back because I do love it, right? And it's what I do. But that gives me a certain level of freedom that I didn't have before. Yeah. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's like a new lease of life.
Yeah.
It's like a complete new lease of life, and I relate on every single level with obviously what I went through, and I find beauty in the smallest of things now, and happiness in the smallest of things now that maybe I used to, but now I really do.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you get to F1 one day, then amazing. That's amazing. But kind of if you don't, then you're finding happiness in everything else as well, which is a really important message, I'd say.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, here's hoping you do, but
of course I love to,
yeah.
and that's why I work hard. It didn't change me in that way. Like I'm still very competitive. I still want to be the best, and it's not like I'm just like, oh, I'm living life, whatever. No, like I want to do great things, not just with racing, but one thing that I remember thinking was, I remember one time after the crash, I was in my wheelchair. I couldn't do anything by myself. I was in so much pain. Mm-hmm. I was having a really bad day, even in that moment, a bad day for what my standard was back then, right? And I remember thinking like, damn, back in the day, I would have been feeling just as bad if like I had a fight with my girlfriend. Like I was thinking, how stupid was I?
Yeah.
Like that's not a real problem, And I realized like when you feel miserable, you feel just as miserable for something this big or something this big. So then that's when I kind of realized how important it is to put stuff in perspective and kind of like compartmentalize certain things. Like that's not really that big of a deal, and Yeah, it's been great. I think I don't want to say the accident was a good thing, because I wouldn't wish it on anybody, and because Anthoine passed away. But I have managed to see good things even
Yeah.
with everything. Like certain things I wouldn't want to not have, right? Like certain experiences, and as a whole, I would say the experience for me has been more positive than negative, definitely. But it's just very difficult to explain that to somebody that hasn't gone through something similar, because it's something that you kind of have to live through.
Yeah.
Do you think people realize that when they're much older, even if they don't go through something like that?
That's a really good question.
Because I always think about
That's
that.
a really good question. I don't know, actually, because you're right in the sense where you say it's sad that we have to sometimes go through these things for us to realize these things. Just like I know I did, and like you said you did, and I've spoken to a lot of other people that say the same thing.
Yeah.
So then it's like, well, what happens if you don't have
If you
to,
never
if
have
you
something
never
like
have
that?
to go through something like that? And please God, people don't have to.
I hope so.
Yeah, I really hope
yeah.
people don't. But you're right. And then you get to, 80, 90. Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think some people know they'll never have that light bulb moment, I think. Unless they understand it or people explain it to them. Does that make sense? I think the more they hear about it, and it might help them reevaluate. But I think that is sad in a way, though, that we do have to go through these things. But then if we don't go through these things, sometimes some of us don't.
Yeah, you never get it. Yeah, it's something I always wonder.
What do you think?
I think as you get older, you probably some things you do realize.
Yeah.
But I think never the whole scope of it unless you have an experience like it.
Yeah.
But I also think that with age, most people have maybe not something so bad, but your parents pass away. Like you have traumatizing events, and that's what makes you realize. So I think in the evolution of a person's life, it's already planned for you to have those moments. Some people just have them prematurely, like us, when something like that happens. But it's something that you will get eventually, one way or another. For sure, some people still don't take it with the right approach, and I think a lot of it, like a message I give to many people, is it's all about how you see things, like, and what you make of the cards you're dealt with. I know it's like a cliche, but it's so true. Like, so many people live unhappy and don't do what they really love, and don't chase something they want because they're like, oh, I can't, like, it's too difficult. Like, sometimes you just gotta try. You gotta do it. And one thing that happened as well was when I thought I was dying with my lungs, I was dying in peace, because I had worked my ass off for 19 years of my life. And I was like, okay, like, and literally, like, I had this conversation with my parents, like, in the hospital. Like, I was like, don't worry about me, like, I'll be fine, because I've done everything that I wanted to do. Like, I would love to do it for another 19 years, but don't worry about me. And then that's also what made me realize, like, okay, if I make it through this, I need to keep that mentality, because that was correct, and I really don't want to die with regrets. I think that's probably one of the scariest things.
No, I agree. I think it's really interesting that you were able to say that, straight after the accident, that you were able to say something like that. Because I think a lot of people can't say things like that in their life. I think they get to a point where they wish they did something, like you said, or they wish they followed their dream, or they wish they told that person they loved them. Do you see what I mean? It's any of those things that people are too scared to do. But what I've learned before my accident, but also I think even more now, is saying yes to life, but also not just saying yes to life, is what's going to happen. What's the worst thing that's going to happen if you do that thing you're scared about doing?
Yeah.
They're going to say no, or it's not going to happen. The worst thing is it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
but you won't know unless you try.
And it goes back to perspective, right? Because even
Yeah.
with that, what do you think is? No, I'm gonna tell. I'm trying to think. Like an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there's Janet, that's Janet,
Okay.
right? She works in an office as, I don't know, a sales manager or whatever,
Okay.
and she hates her job,
Yeah.
right? It's
Mm.
a 9 to 5 about something that she's not passionate about. And she's like, damn, like one day I'm gonna quit and open up my own agency.
Yeah.
Right? One day. Janet is 28 by now. 28, like, okay, like time to start making, your own way. It's like, no, but I'm scared because if I do it, what if it doesn't work? What's the worst that can happen? Well, I will have to find another job.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, like that's not a disaster.
Yeah.
So another thing that happened to me was like I was at such a low point that everything seemed like a positive. I was like, I cannot go any lower than where I am right now, and that gives you that freedom of like, fuck it, like, I'm gonna try, and then you're able to keep that sort of mentality when you need it. Like, whatever, we'll try.
Yeah, because rock bottom is it's a pretty low place, isn't it?
It's super low.
Yeah.
But it's liberating. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, ooh, like I don't care.
Yeah.
I got to certain points where I couldn't care. Like, if I was hit by a train, like, I wasn't suicidal or anything, but like, I did not care.
Yeah.
I did not care about myself. Like, my family, yes, of course. But I even also was a lot of the pain medication. The side effects those things had on me. Were you ever on them?
Yeah, I was on a few, but only for kind of short periods of time after my operations.
Okay.
I mean, I was just at home, like, horizontal for 2 weeks on pain medication.
Yeah. That was me, but I was on it for like 4 months.
Yeah. And
it got to a point where I couldn't feel any, even no bad or good emotions. Like, I couldn't feel.
You just were nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was numb. It was crazy. And that I understood then for the first time why some people inflict themselves, like cut themselves, like before I never really understood the concept until I was like, even like cutting myself would be better because I would feel some sort of pain or something than nothing. Yeah, let's do that.
No, but I understand it.
You know what I mean? Like,
no, I do understand it because what you just said and how I see it is when you are at rock bottom and when you are that low, I now understand also why some people turn to other forms of whether it's substances or I can actually understand now why people can turn to things like that because taking that first step or that mindset to be more positive, that's actually harder than going the other way. So taking that first step to being that first step to the new life or positivity or anything on your recovery, it's actually so much easier to stay kind of where you are. It feels safe.
Yeah, and you try to find other ways of getting feelings, feeling something, right? Yeah, but another thing that people ask me is like, so how did you get out of, like, what was the key to making it out of that? I don't know, what do you think? But there's not a key. Like, it's just like, it's a process. Yeah. It's like day after day, and maybe for the first month you'll feel like nothing changed, but then you'll do another month, and then maybe at the end of the second month it'll be a little bit better, and then by the third month you'll be like, okay, like, it's not like, oh, I'm gonna be positive tomorrow and I'm gonna go for a run and then I'm gonna feel perfect. No, it doesn't work like that. And that was a bit kind of how my whole recovery went. It was really like I had a mountain to climb and I was just doing like a little step every day, little step. And sometimes, like, even after 4, 5, 6 months, I was like, is this even worth it? Like, what am I doing? But I was lucky that I didn't know any better because I was already very committed before my racing. So I was like, this is all I know how to do. So I just kept really grinding. And then before you know it, at 10 months, like, oh, okay, like there's progress. You know, we're getting somewhere. It's good news. And here I am 3 years later, and people see me, like the doctors that saved my legs originally. I saw them mid last year, and I walked into the office, and they were like, you know, what the hell? You know, they were really impressed. So that was nice. I was like, yeah, it's good.
It's the small steps. It's the one step after the next step. It doesn't matter how teeny tiny that step is. It is that one step after the next. It's like you said, it's a mountain, it's a climb, and it's it's all part of your recovery are the small steps. And you're right when you say you're not gonna wake up the next day and be like, right, I'm gonna put on my superhero cape and be Mr. Positive today.
No,
it doesn't work like that.
No.
But I think that's where it's so important to never give up, because you might not see the light for a very, very, very long time, but if you just keep going, it does arrive.
Yeah. So what was it for you? The hardest? I know it's difficult because people ask me that question, but what was the worst moment for you in everything you went through?
I think the hardest moment was having my complete independence taken from me, like everything. I couldn't even get a glass of water on my own. And I think, I was 25 at the time, and I think, being 25 and not even being able to get your own glass of water, it's your head. My head didn't know how to, how to understand how to cope with it, how to understand what was going on, and it was like, but all I need to do is walk over to the kitchen sink, and when my mind is kind of saying you can do it, but my body couldn't, it was, why is this not working? Definitely. I'm relearning how to walk was wild.
Weird.
Yeah, I mean, the last time I learned how to walk, I was tiny.
did they make you do it in the pool? Because I did a lot of pool.
No, I did it with my physio. I was holding his hands.
Oh,
yeah, with my knee brace on from my ankle to my thigh. Yeah, and he kind of told me to take a step, and it was really interesting because that first step he asked me to take, I remember I couldn't take it. I went forward. I was leaning, and he said, just, take a step. And I said, I can't. I said, I don't know which leg to take, what to do. And he said, pick a leg. I said, I couldn't pick a leg. It was crazy. Yeah. I said to him, I said, can you pick one for me? He said, okay, that one. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, it is weird. I remember, for me, I would wonder, after like a few months in a wheelchair without taking a single step, I would look at people walking, and I was like, I wonder if I remember how to walk. And I would try to remember the feeling of walking, and I couldn't. Yeah. Something that's so basic. Yeah. Like I couldn't imagine like having a balance and all that. It was very weird. And for me, another thing that was very hard was I never had a clear. The doctors never had a clear kind of idea of how much I was going to recover. Yeah. So really, most of the time, the expectations, I would say, were that, okay, maybe we can save the leg, but is the leg gonna be usable? Like, am I gonna be able to put weight on it? Am I gonna be able to stand the pain, etc.? So I would see like people walking, or like I remember I saw one time this guy carrying his daughter on his shoulder, on his neck, a little baby, and I started crying. If I ever have a daughter or a son, will I be able to do that? Like really deep stuff. I was 20, I was thinking about having kids, but it was like, those are the things that really, then you understand what's really important to you, like I was not thinking about, will I be able to go to a club and dance? No, like, am I going to be able to go on a walk with my wife, and walk the dog, whatever. So, yeah, it was weird. It was weird, but it was good in many ways.
I remember, I think I was driving home from physio, and someone was running. I mean, I couldn't drive for a while anyway, but once I could start driving again, I remember someone was running along the side of the road, and I think I started crying because I was just, I was walking again, but I couldn't run yet. I definitely couldn't run yet. And I remember I just started crying because I just thought, look at you, it's so easy.
Yeah.
Like you have
If you only knew how lucky you are. Yeah.
If you only knew how lucky you are that
Yeah.
you can get, both feet in front of the other and run.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That
I used to cry at the most random of things. I used to cry.
Yeah.
Things that I couldn't do at the time, and I wasn't sure. I mean, I knew I'd recover, but I didn't know how long it would take me. I used to cry at the most random things.
Well, I can relate. Were you driving with both? Like, how was the driving for you initially?
I wasn't allowed to drive manual for a very long time.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Which is the leg?
It's my left leg.
Left leg. So the clutch would be.
Yeah. I wasn't allowed to. I think they told me if it was my right leg, I would have been able to drive manual a lot sooner, but.
Yeah. You know what I did? So you talked about independence. It was the same for me. But I am a very independent guy. I've always been. Imagine this. I had been living alone since I was 14.
Yeah.
So another part of the recovery was learning to live with my family again.
Yeah.
Right? It was weird and it was hard and there were a lot of fights. So I wanted to be as independent as possible. So I rented this van that actually looks like a London cab, and it would have a ramp come out, and I could go in with my wheelchair. But that's meant so you take somebody in the wheelchair, you put him in, strap him in, and then you drive him. But the person in the wheelchair is not supposed to drive. So I was like, no, I'm gonna do this myself, right? So I ended up buying like a hook.
Yeah.
So I had a big pole, and I was able to put the ramp down from the outside because it had a button.
Yeah.
But then once I got into the car, I couldn't put the ramp back in because the button was on the outside of the car. So with this pole, like I would get some distance and really floor it and get the wheelchair up, and then get the pole and put the ramp back in.
Yeah.
And then I would hop from my wheelchair to the driver's seat. I would put my right leg, which had the big medals, over the dashboard in the car, and I would drive with my left. And I was going to therapy by myself. I was going to see friends like that.
Yeah.
So little by little, even those like little small things, they made a big difference, and I started to kind of been able to live a little bit of my life. Even like showering in the beginning, it would take me an hour to shower. Like it was a hassle. By the end of it, 10 minutes. I was like with a wheelchair, brakes, cooking. The stove was like up here at the beginning. I was like, what am I doing? I can't do anything. By the end of it, I could do whatever I wanted by myself in the wheelchair.
But that's the thing, is now you can look back at, when you're cooking, tonight or whenever you are cooking next, when you shower, you can look back and go, but at one point in my life, I couldn't do this like that.
Yeah. Everything.
It's just being grateful for those moments, but also it's adapting to whatever you've got going on. You adapted by making your own makeshift car, basically.
Yeah.
It's being able to adapt to, okay, so I've had this taken away from me. How am I gonna? So in a different way, when I couldn't get a glass of water, and it was by at one point I was like, okay, I need to do this. Not that my physio or my surgeon were happy when I told them. But I used to hop. I started hopping around. I mean, there was me. I used to use crutches every time I went anywhere. And then I would see the kitchen, and I didn't want to keep calling people. Yeah. I didn't want to keep asking. I mean, it was nice to start. It was nice for like a week or two.
Maybe.
Like it was nice at the start, but then I wanted to get my own glass of water.
Yeah.
And I just remember kind of just started to hop everywhere, and I was like, I knew that was so dangerous if I slipped.
Yeah.
But I had to adapt to just, I had to adapt in my way.
Yeah. It's hard. I went to the club a couple of times in my wheelchair with the external. The first time they didn't let me in because they said I was a liability. Yeah. So they said that if I would fall, like they looked at my leg, obviously, like I was bleeding, right? Like it was bad. And they were like, no, like you can't go in. So I was very disappointed. And then the second time I arranged, so with the owner of the club, I was like, please let me in. And I went in, and I was like, that was another big thing. Like I made it a point, even if I was really depressed and I didn't feel like doing much, I made it a point to put myself out there and
Yeah.
kind of like continue living some sort of life.
Yeah.
And see some friends, do activities. Yeah,
Yeah.
it helped me. It really helped me. That and the support I had from family, and
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
it was really big. So I think it was all part of that process.
Yeah. Were you scared to get back in a car? Do you feel like there was any fear, or?
Yeah. Like what happened was, we as drivers, we are, I'm gonna say, ignorant to the fact that we are really putting our lives on the line. Most people know it, you know, like, oh, motorsports is dangerous, and people tell me all the time, oh, it's crazy, it's so dangerous what you're doing. But I can tell you, like, most drivers don't want to believe it is, you know. They're like, yeah, it's fine, it's safe. So what the accident did was, it just made me so much more aware of the actual dangers we're putting ourselves in. So going back into a car, yeah, for sure, I would even think in the beginning about the accident a lot, you know, like, I never had any sort of flashbacks or anything very intense, you know, but it was like, okay, like, I am getting back in, and I remember I would think, this could be the last time I get in a car, you know, like, I could have another crash like that, and I could die. So it was a bit emotional, but little by little, just the adrenaline is like a drug, you know. Like, you get into it, and you're like, oh man, this feels good, and you start feeling safer. Second race, nothing happens. Third race, nothing happens. By the fifth race, you're like, oh yeah, it's safe.
Yeah, you're confident about.
Yeah, you know, that's how it works. That's the only way we're able to do what we do.
Yeah.
You can't be hopping in every time into a race car like, I might die today. Like,
Yeah.
imagine.
I mean, if you tell yourself that, then yeah, you have to get in.
That's no fun.
Yeah.
No. You have to be ignorant to it, like, and just.
Yeah. No, I get that. I mean, I'm obviously not a race car driver, but I do understand
But you
it.
understand. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I understand. I do. And obviously, you know, you said at the time when you obviously had the accident, and you know, you were first in hospital, you didn't know about Anthoine. When you did find out about it, how was that?
It was hard. That was one of the hardest things. And also my memory is a bit blurry about those few days pre-coma. So post-accident pre-coma, those 3 days are like a blur. But I think what happened was, my parents wanted to wait maybe like a couple days until they told me, until I recovered, because I was still in a pretty bad state. But then the morning after the crash, a Belgian prosecutor came to the hospital to make me sign some documents. And the document said that somebody had passed away in the crash. So that's how I found out, and I started having a breakdown. So my parents had to be phoned by the hospital, their hotel, and they had to come over to the hospital to see me, and they said I was like, that was not good. And then I had to find out again after the coma, because when I came out of the coma, I couldn't remember anything. The last thing I remembered post coma was the crash, not the days after the crash in the hospital in Belgium. Really crazy.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So then again, but the second time, my subconscious knew. I was like, yeah, I kind of remember now, and it was still quite the news. And yeah, I had to deal with that for many months. Like, I was seeing a psychologist, and it was part of the recovery also. You know, the emotional recovery is important when you have something so traumatic. So yeah, it was hard. It was hard. It still is, to be honest. To think about it, it's not something that makes me super emotional anymore, because it's something that I've had to deal with every day for the last 3 years. So it gets to the point where you're used to thinking about it, but it's just weird, because it's not about me, you know. Like, I wasn't the only one involved, and I know there's a lot of people that were just as hurt by the accident that
Yeah.
were not me, you know, his family, etc.
Yeah.
So that's really hard to think about.
Yeah, but I think that's like what you were saying with any kind of trauma or recovery. It's not just physical; it's a mental recovery as well.
Yeah.
And the mental side of things is, like we were saying, it's how when you change your perspective and when you learn how to, you just learn whatever's going on and how to live with what's happened and how to move forward in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, mental health is, I wouldn't say I'm big on mental health because I don't talk about it publicly, but I am. In part, most of it is due to the accident. Like I realized how important that is, you know, and it's also made me be able to be more vulnerable than I was before.
Yeah.
You know, before I was like, I'm fine, you know, I wouldn't talk about my
Oh,
feelings.
you talk about your feelings now.
No, I mean, I'm still.
No, I don't.
I wouldn't not like. No, I do. I wouldn't say I'm like you know, the most expressive person, but I do like talking about my
Yeah.
feelings. And the accident taught me that, like, if you don't talk about your feelings,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to go through something at some point, right? Like you have to get it out. You need to rely on people. And there's nothing wrong there. There's just taboo about it. In some aspects, more for guys than girls, you know, and I think that sucks because I know a lot of guys, a lot of friends, and myself, like we struggle with stuff as well, and many guys don't really like to talk about it. It's like seen as weird, you know, and that's not right. But I think it's changing slowly, and it's getting a little bit better.
Would you have advice for, as we were saying, you know, then guys that, obviously for anyone that might be struggling, it's like...
I would say the biggest advice, but to be honest, very, very much also for girls, is get therapy.
Yeah.
Everybody should be in therapy. Honestly. Even if you think there's nothing wrong with you, you should be like...
There is somewhere.
No, yeah. Yes. It's just, you know, like everybody, I'm not saying like go every day, every week, like, but every once in a while, just you should try it at least once. I think, right? And especially if you are going through something and you know you are, then undoubtedly do it, because it helps. It helps, and like I said before, there's nothing to be ashamed of with that. Like, if I go out on a date with a girl and she tells me, yeah, I go to therapy, like, that's like a green flag, you know? Everybody's talking about green flags. Like, that's like, yeah, you know? Then if I see someone that clearly is going through something, it's like, no, like, therapy's for crazies. Like,
it's a red flag.
That's a red flag, you know? Girl, I'm going to send you to therapy. Yeah.
You're able to see the red flags and the green flags.
Yeah,
so
I'm like, you
more.
know, if it gets to a point where I think therapy is needed, but there's no mention of the therapy, I'm like, so, like, what else do you do during the
Just like, so what do you do in the morning?
So what's your schedule like? Oh man, no, that's messed up. But the point is, yeah, everybody should.
Yeah, no, I actually agree in some ways. I do. So what advice would you give then to somebody that's going through a physical accident or injury, and kind of they get to the point where they're at rock bottom and they don't have the goal, they don't have the hope, you know. What would you say?
I would say that rock bottom, I would almost say enjoy rock bottom, because it's liberating in many ways, like we spoke about before, but also really understand and know that it will get better. Like, it will. It's something that I had to go through, where everybody was like, yeah, it's gonna be okay, and many people will pity you and try to make you feel better, but no, like, actually, with time and patience and adaptation, you will have a life again. So think about that when you're really at that lowest level, because there is something to live for, which is not easy to always see and realize when you're there.
Yeah. No, I like that. Yeah, there is always something to live for.
Always.
And if you can't see it now,
you will.
You will.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, look at me, like, now. Like 3-4 years ago when this was happening, I was like, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. And now, like, I wouldn't trade my life with anyone. You know, like I'm enjoying it, even with the pain I have and whatever. There's always a way to adapt and find a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just find the way, because it will arise one day. So what does the new year have in store for you?
It's gonna be a big year for me. I'm going back to Formula 2. So obviously that brings its own commitments and it makes my schedule very busy. But on a deeper level, it's going back to the category where I had the crash. You know, it's kind of like restarting again from where it ended. So that means a lot to me, and it's also just very exciting to be there for any driver. It's a dream. So I'll be doing 28 races through the season, traveling a lot. I'm still trying to get to Formula 1. That's still my goal. But really, my main focus right now is doing 1 or 2 years of Formula 2 in the coming seasons, and I want to win the championship. So that's what I think about every day now, basically. Which is my happy place, actually. When I'm like, you see me now, like all stressed, like, oh yeah, I have gym meetings. Secretly, I love it. Right? I live for that. I can complain all I want, but it makes me happy.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to seeing you win it.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. So is there anything else that you want to discuss today, or?
You tell me.
No, well.
I'm just
a guest. you are just a guest, but this one's all about you. So, no, I think that's.
We've covered it all.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely perfect. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.